In the history of humanity, there have always been schools where individuals with extraordinary abilities passed on their knowledge to those seeking it. These schools, known as occult schools, teach what is called esoteric science or occult teaching. However, this term can be misleading. Some might think that these schools aim to create an exclusive group that hoards knowledge. They may wonder why this knowledge isn't openly shared if it is genuine. One might assume that if it were true knowledge, it would be openly communicated for the benefit of all. So why the secrecy? Those initiated into the nature of this occult knowledge are not surprised by such thoughts from the uninitiated. Only those who have experienced initiation into the higher secrets of being can understand its true nature. But how can the uninitiated develop an interest in this so-called occult knowledge? And why should they search for something about which they have no idea? This question is based on an erroneous conception of the nature of occult knowledge. In reality, there is no difference between occult knowledge and all other forms of knowledge and capacity. Occult knowledge is no more of a secret for the average person than writing is a secret for someone who has never learned to read. Just as anyone can learn to write with the correct method, so too can anyone become a disciple and even a teacher of occult knowledge. The only difference is that the conditions for acquiring occult knowledge are not hindered by poverty or the state of civilization one is born into. For the attainment of knowledge in the higher worlds, there is no obstacle for those who sincerely seek it. Many believe that one must find the masters of higher knowledge to receive enlightenment from them. However, those who strive earnestly after this knowledge need not fear any difficulty or obstacle in their search for an initiate who can lead them into the profound secrets of the world. An initiate will find them if there is an earnest and worthy endeavor to attain this knowledge. It is a strict law among all initiates to withhold no knowledge due to anyone, but there is also a law that insists that no one shall receive any occult knowledge until they are worthy. The order that embraces all initiates is surrounded by a wall, and two strict laws hold its constituents together. One may live in close friendship with an initiate, yet this wall will separate them until one becomes an initiate oneself. Even though one may enjoy the heart and love of an initiate, they will only impart their secret when one is ready for it. No flattery or coercion will induce them to divulge anything that ought not to be disclosed, as one may not yet understand how to receive the secret into their soul. The ways that prepare a person for the reception of a secret are clearly prescribed and indicated by unfading, everlasting letters within the temples where initiates guard the higher secrets. These temples were once outwardly visible, but are mostly invisible to external sight today, as our lives have become more materialistic. However, they are present everywhere, and all who seek may find them. Only within one's soul may a person discover the means to open the lips of the initiate. To a certain high degree, one must develop within themselves special faculties, and then the greatest treasures of the spirit become their own. One must begin with a certain fundamental attitude of the soul, which the student of occultism calls the path of devotion or veneration. Only he who maintains this attitude can become a disciple in occultism. Even in children, signs of approaching discipleship can be seen. Some children look up with religious awe to those they venerate, showing a respect that forbids them to admit any thought of criticism or opposition in their hearts. From such children, many disciples are recruited. Have you ever paused outside the door of a venerated person, feeling a religious awe as you entered the room, which for you is a holy place? If so, you may have shown the germ of your future discipleship. It is a blessing for every developing person to have such emotions upon which to build. However, such qualities are not the germ of submissiveness and slavery. Experience teaches us that those who venerate where veneration is due can hold their heads high. Veneration is always in its place when it arises from the depths of the heart. If we do not develop within ourselves the feeling that there is something higher than ourselves, we will never find enough strength to evolve into something higher. The initiate has acquired the power of lifting his intellect to the heights of knowledge by guiding his heart into the depths of veneration and devotion. The heights of the spirit can only be reached by passing through the portals of humility. One can only acquire the right knowledge when one has learned to esteem it. Man certainly has the right to gaze upon reality, but he must first acquire this right. There are laws in the spiritual life as in the physical life. Rub a glass rod with an appropriate material, and it will become electric. Similarly, every feeling of true devotion which opens out in the soul develops a power which may sooner or later lead to the path of knowledge. He who possesses this feeling of devotion, or who is fortunate enough to receive it, brings a great deal with him when seeking entrance to higher knowledge. However, he who brings no such preparation will find himself confronted with difficulties, unless he undertakes rigorous self-education to create the devotional mood within himself. In our time, it is especially important to give full attention to this point. Our civilization tends more towards criticism and judgment than toward devotion and selfless veneration. Our children already criticize far more than they worship. Every judgment and criticism frustrate the powers of the soul for attaining higher knowledge. It is necessary to cultivate the devotional mood everywhere in one's environment. One must look for that which demands admiration and homage. One should try to renounce entirely all criticism or judgment whenever possible. Experience in occultism shows how much is owed to the continual search for the good in all things and the withholding of all carping criticism. This must not remain only as an external rule of life, but must take possession of the innermost part of our souls. We have the power to perfect ourselves and transform ourselves completely, but this transformation must take place in the innermost self, in the mental life. It is not enough to show respect, only an outward bearing toward a person. One must have this respect in one's thoughts. The disciple must begin by drawing devotion into his thought life. He must banish from his consciousness all thoughts of disrespect or criticism and endeavor to cultivate thoughts of devotion. Every moment in which we set ourselves to banish from our consciousness whatever remains of disparaging, suspicious judgment of our fellow men brings us nearer to the knowledge of higher things. He who has experience in these matters will know that in every such moment, powers are awakened in man which otherwise remain dormant. This fundamental mood of devotion floods the entire soul life of a man at first, finding in this fundamental mood its pivot. Just as the sun through its rays will vivify everything living, so in the life of the disciple, this reverence vivifies all the perceptions of the soul. Every idea that becomes an ideal creates within you living power. However, every idea that does not become an ideal for you slays a power in your soul. The disciple must continually try to follow this advice. Experienced occultists are aware of how much they owe to the continual search for the good in all things and the withholding of all carping criticism. This must not remain only as an external rule of life. Rather, it must take possession of the innermost part of our souls. We have the power to perfect ourselves and, by and by, to transform ourselves completely. However, this transformation must take place in the innermost self, in the mental life. It is not enough to show respect only in outward bearing toward a person. One must have this respect in one's thoughts. The disciple must begin by drawing this devotion into his thought life. He must altogether banish from his consciousness all thoughts of disrespect or criticism, and he must endeavor straightway to cultivate thoughts of devotion. Every moment in which we set ourselves to banish from our consciousness whatever remains in it of disparaging, suspicious judgment of our fellow men, every such moment brings us nearer to the knowledge of higher things. And we rise rapidly when, in such moments, we fill our consciousness only with thoughts that evoke in us admiration, respect, and veneration for men and things. The disciple must continually try to follow this advice. Experienced occultists are aware of how much they owe to the continual searching for the good in all things and the withholding of all carping criticism. This must not remain only as an external rule of life. Rather, it must take possession of the innermost part of our souls. We have it in our power to perfect ourselves and by to transform ourselves completely. However, this transformation must take place in the innermost self, in the mental life. It is not enough that I show respect only in my outward bearing toward a person. I must have this respect in my thoughts. The disciple must begin by drawing this devotion into his thought life. He must altogether banish from his consciousness all thoughts of disrespect or criticism, and he must endeavor straightway to cultivate thoughts of devotion. Every moment in which we set ourselves to banish from our consciousness whatever remains in it of disparaging, suspicious judgment of our fellow men, every such moment brings us nearer to the knowledge of higher things. And we rise rapidly when, in such moments, we fill our consciousness only with thoughts that evoke in us admiration, respect, and veneration for men and things.